The first slide that I'll present is just the general overview of the price data that we saw during this previous set of sales. As you can see, we've been collecting this price data since the spring of 2017. So it's good that we have a nice trend line that we're able to see with that now. Looking back to the fall of 2020, it was the highest averages we had seen since back in the fall of 2017. So a strong sales season. I know myself, I was a little nervous going into that fall as well as the spring with everything that had happened with COVID, and was very pleasantly surprised with how strong the bull prices really were. In the spring of 2021, it was actually the strongest spring sell season we had seen in the time that we've been recording this price data. So just a tremendous sell season all the way throughout. And as you can see where this trend line is going, we're certainly hopeful that going into the next fall season, the prices will continue to be really strong in the bull market. The other good news is that we also saw a higher volume of red Angus bulls sold. And like I said, it was a strong fall season in terms of the prices. And what makes it even better is that when you're selling a higher volume of bulls and they're bringing more, that just means there must be tremendous demand for the product. So actually the highest volume of bulls sold in the fall, and then the second highest that we've seen since we've been collecting this data in the spring. So definitely a high volume of bulls hitting the market, as well as them bringing tremendous prices. All of the data that we will be presenting throughout this presentation is based on the data that our team was able to collect at sales that we attended. So it's not by any means all inclusive of every single red Angus bull that was sold throughout the US. It's just a representation of the sales that we were able to attend. So with that, there is 110 sales that we attended this year. It was the highest number of sales we've been able to make it to as a staff, probably largely thanks to the fact that we had an addition to our staff in Rachel Oliver. So she allowed us to, hit more sales, and all of us still hit the road pretty hard, and we're able to make it to 110 sales in the spring, and we made it to 23 last fall. As many of you are probably aware, if you're familiar with our commercial marketing team, the reason that we're called the commercial marketing team is our primary objective when we attend these sales is to interact with commercial customers. Of course, we'll do what we can for seed stock producers, but honestly, our main target audience is interacting with those commercial producers and helping them to develop a marketing plan for when they take their calves to market, as well as working with them on some of our added value programs, such as the feeder calf certification program. It helps when we're allowed a speaking opportunity ahead of seed stock sales to be able to reach that captive audience of a large volume of commercial buyers that would be in attendance at a bull sale. So out of the 110 sales that we attended in the spring, we did have 77 speaking opportunities, which was wonderful. We really appreciate all the seed stock producers that allow us to speak ahead of the sale. We also started recording the number of contacts that we established at the sales. We would define an impactful contact as somebody that we had a conversation with about their operation, a commercial producer, and perhaps visited with them about the opportunities we have through the Red Angus Association to help them market their calves. So we had 509 impactful contacts that we recorded as a marketing team. We averaged that out over the sales we attended to nearly 5 impactful contacts per sale. And from that, we developed a targeted list of bull sale contacts. So that's really valuable for us, especially this time of year. We're going out and doing a lot of ranch visits and trying to interact with commercial customers who are the customers of those seed stock producers from sales we visited. So we really like that list. And if you, as a seed stock producer, ever have a specific commercial customer you think would benefit from a visit from any of us, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know who that is. We're always looking for a good target list of ranch visits to complete. To me, this might be the most impressive slide that I'm going to present in my set. we already saw that overall on average, the prices were very strong. But what made that so was probably the fact that we saw more high sellers than we ever have in the past. So we record, of course, all the price data. So from that, I sort out how many bulls each season sold for 15,000 or more, which would obviously be probably bulls being sold to either other seed stock producer or even AI studs. And so we had 86 bulls that we recorded that sold for that value or more. So that's very impressive to me. And even more impressive is that there was 37 sales that we attended that averaged over 5,000. So that would certainly be the definition of a very strong sale to me, is if you're averaging over 5,000. And we had 37 sales that did that. So almost a little over 30%. Which is very good. And we're very happy that so many of our Red Angus seed stock providers had such strong sales this year. I'll switch gears just a little bit here and start talking about the genetic profile of the bulls that we had the privilege to see sell. This shows the genetic profile just for those bulls that were on the previous slides, that were the high selling bulls, which we defined as bringing $15,000 or more. As you can see on these high selling bulls, they obviously are going to have a pretty strong genetic profile. So I analyze on average of those bulls, what percent they would fall in, or what percentile rank they would fall in for our various traits, including indexes and EPDs. As we would expect on the index traits, they were pretty high in terms of their percentile rank, especially on this new ProS index that we have. This is an all-purpose index, so I'm not surprised that the bulls that were the highest selling were in the top end for that particular index. Probably also what stands out is they were also very good in terms of their growth traits, weaning weight, yearling weight, and average daily gain. And in addition, you know, one part that stands out is also their carcass traits. This is carcass weight and ribeye area. So definitely some good information to be had from that slide, and knowing what those people that are paying a lot of money for bulls are looking at in their genetic profile. This slide shows the correlation between the sell price and the EPD. So this would include all sell bulls that we saw and entered into our database. I'll point out the highlights from this slide. So the sell price had the highest correlation with the ProS index, which we would expect. I'm just doing the group of traits, ProS, as well as Gridmaster, weaning weight, yearling weight, and average daily gain. So as we saw on the previous slide, growth traits seem to be very important to buyers that were purchasing Red Angus bulls, and they wanted them well balanced too, which is indicated by the fact that the ProS index had a high correlation with sell price. The only oddity I thought this year compared to previous years was that stayability actually had a negative correlation. I honestly am not sure maybe what caused that. In previous years, it has been positive, which is what we would expect. And that's probably shown better on this slide. Hopefully y'all can see it. I know there's a lot of bars on this graph, but the trend lines for the most part follow similarly to what they have in previous years. The indexes, of course, as we would expect, have a high correlation with sell price. Birth weight, we would well expect that that correlation would be negative, since we're selecting for a lower birth weight. Growth traits would be high. Dry matter intake maybe isn't what we would expect. One thing that was quite a bit different than previous years was the correlation was much stronger between milk and the sell price. We determined that was probably likely to a difference in the way that the milk EPD is now being calculated. And there has been a few changes in the calculation of several of these EPDs, especially through the maternal suite, which might account for why we see slightly different correlations. This slide is a new one that I did this year that I haven't done in the past. The question had arisen as to whether commercial producers put more emphasis on EPDs or actual and ultrasound data. we would well hope that they would put more emphasis on EPDs, because science tells us that those are more accurate to predict what the progeny of those animals would do. And we were pleasantly surprised to find that that was the case, that bull buyers were putting more emphasis on the EPDs than they were on the actual traits. The trend lines pretty much follow, with EPDs having a slightly stronger correlation with sell price for each similar trait. The only one that didn't, and I wasn't too surprised by this, was back fat. It seemed that there was a higher correlation between the ultrasound back fat than there was with the back fat EPD. It's not necessarily a trait that most people probably put a lot of emphasis on when they're looking at the genetic profile, but when producers go to look at the bull on sell day, typically they tend to gravitate towards the bulls that are a little bit more fleshy, which is why I expect we see that stronger correlation. That will wrap up my series of slides. And so now I will be turning it over to Nolan to go over the next section.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So for this next section, just kind of going over a little bit more about some of the breeding, and then some of our travel, and some female data as well. And so one kind of question that I guess we get asked often is the price advantage of AI versus natural bred animals. And so I mean, you can kind of think to yourself and think what where you would place that. And then on the next slide, it'll show here that ET had about a $200 price advantage over AI. And then AI had about a $700 price advantage over natural service. And so you can see the percentages there, about half of them AI, a little under half AI, small percent ET, and about the same natural as there were AI. And so always interesting to look at this and see what the value is, just based on the different genetics that you have access to when you use AI. On our next section, just looking at the category of sale bulls, you'll see that the majority of what we saw sell were category 1A, and those sat pretty close with in terms of price with those 1B cattle, but there was just a little bit, about $150 difference there in those 1B bulls over the 1A bulls. But don't see all that many 2s and 3s. See a couple of Sim Red Cross bulls being sold, but for the most part, as you can see there, we're seeing 1A bulls being sold, and their price kind of sticks in there with the 1Bs. Then I guess another question that we get asked is what percentage of sale bulls had genomic testing, but more importantly, what's the advantage to genomic testing? It's an expensive test, and it gets a lot of data back, but what exactly is the price advantage? Is it going to pay for itself? And so I would say the answer to that is yes, because when you look at the data, if they have genomic testing, which about half of the bulls that we saw sell did, then there is a price advantage there that you can see. 48% of them had genomic testing and averaged $5,042, as you can see there, and then those without genomic testing, those sales averaged $4,878. So I believe the most expensive genomic test is $95 or $92. So putting that into a bull, it pays off and more than doubles itself when you go to sell that animal with the genomically enhanced EPDs. So this is the female data collection is a new thing that we decided to do this year, just because once again, we get asked all the time, what's the value of a registered bred heifer, or what's the value of a open commercial female? And so we figured we see plenty of them sell, whether it be individual, which is obviously more common on the registered side, or in groups on the commercial side. But we see them sell at a lot of these bull sales. And so it was nice this year to be able to kind of, as the sales season was progressing, be able to go look at this data and kind of let someone know exactly where it was sitting on average, and they could decide whether they wanted to put some females in their sale. And so I won't go through and read all these. I guess I would just highlight commercial cow calf pairs, and as well as those registered cow calf pairs. Although we didn't see that many sell, they were still the highest dollar, as we would expect, because the work's already done. But bred heifers kind of sticking in pretty close right behind them was interesting to me. So this is just kind of put in a little bit of a graph form for you to be able to look at and kind of do a comparison in a different way, and just be able to look at the data in a different manner. So now the mapping of the marketing team it's always fun to kind of see where we all go throughout the year, and how many different areas we cover, and kind of just with the location of our staff as well as the sales we attend. You'll see that kind of as we're traveling through the country, we try and hit ranch visits in between those sales, and on our way to sales and on our way back home, as well as had a couple of feeder calf sales at barns that Barrett hit a lot of those, kind of in that central region there. But pretty impressive, the amount of places we hit as we're traveling the road. And so then on the next slide, you'll see it broken up into individual members of the marketing team. And so kind of, as you can see, we stay in certain areas a little bit, but as we go to those different bull sales, we're, like I said, hitting as many ranch visits as we can. That is all for me in terms of that data, but I'll pass it on to Rachel here to talk about some of the state and regional data that we have collected and analyzed.
All right, well, perfect. Yeah, just kind of rolling through. This kind of correlates with the last two slides that Nolan went over. And so basically, this is just data that we collected from the fall and of the spring. And so it just shows the number of sales that we attended and how many bulls were sold, and kind of look to see where that trend of where the most popular places are and where the bulk of the bull battery is. And so as you can clearly see, there's basically just a straight line, but the Great Plains kind of knocked it out of the park with how many bulls were being sold and the sales that we attended there. And then shortly following that one was the Northern Plains and Montana. So those are just some nice, kind of a nice graphic for you to see there of what to look for. On the next slide, this just gives you a better idea and glance over of what, how many head are kind of moved through the different areas of the US. And as before in the other slide, you can definitely see where the bulk of those bulls are moved and where those sales are at. And so then this one is a new one that we did. This was during our board meeting when we presented per request to some of the board members. They were interested in knowing where were some of these transfers. So where were these bulls going back to? Where were their buyers at? And then like it follows with the other slides, it shows kind of the Midwest and the Great Plains are where your bulk of buyers are at. And so if you look at just those top four, Montana, South Dakota, Texas, and Nebraska. Definitely kind of knocked it out of the park with that's where your bulk of buyers are going to be at. This isn't 100% accurate just because not all of our transfers are recorded that we find in the system, but it's fairly close. And so you get a really good idea of where, you know, kind of your customer base is and where you need to be focusing at. Another thing that we look at, so we also look at the offering. So basically all around the sale, what do they have to offer? So when we look and compare for the number of bulls being offered at a sale, obviously the majority, there's less than 50, but when you look at those seed stock producers that are able to put together over 100 bulls, they see definitely an increase in their average and kind of a bigger gap when they're able to produce that many, but that kind of just takes some time. But even the 50 to 100, their average isn't too far behind when you are able to put those together. And so then another one, this one was pretty interesting, I thought, just because it seems like the trend always seems to change with what buyers are looking for. And so I asked Katie earlier today what was last year's trend. And actually, it wasn't the same as what we found this year. So last year, people were willing to pay more and actually did pay more for 2-year-old bulls. And they kind of had a higher average than these 18-month bulls, which kind of was the higher average for this year. Majority are still selling yearlings, but it seems like customers are willing and are looking for a little bit more age advantage. They're not wanting, you know, they may not want the 2-year-old bulls yet, but they're starting to want more kind of older, more developed bulls is what they're looking for and willing to pay a little extra more for is what we found. And then this one is completely subjective through, it's just the foot score. So it's only through the marketing team. Every time we go to the bull sale, we basically average, you either do below average, average or above average foot scoring. So it's only our opinion. It's pretty, we're all pretty even across the board when it comes with all of us on the marketing team, but everyone can have a different opinion. But it just goes to show we might be a little tough on our foot scoring on the marketing team. Only 5% was above average, but clearly at those sales, they definitely did a lot better. And then the average, you know, people take notice and that's what they're willing to pay for. So it was just kind of interesting for me to see that we might be, as a marketing team, a little tough on foot scoring, but it's good to have those good ones there that outline everything. And so next slides are going to be kind of talking about some finer details that we also look at. So we also score when we go to a sale, we score kind of what their catalog looks like. So we're looking at perception and reputation. When you look at the next slide, it goes over
Sorry, I haven't switched yet, Rachel. Harold, I think was going to present these next slides as long as he's got good enough internet.
Okay, perfect. I thought he wasn't doing some older ones down the road, but that's okay. He can go for it.
Go ahead, Rachel. I don't start till 32.
Okay.
Oh, maybe sorry, my bad. Go
No,
for
you're fine. So some of the finer details that we look at, we score the catalog. So every sale that we go to, we look at their catalog and kind of rank it if they follow these 5 kind of guidelines. So what's the paper quality? Is their binding? Does it stay intact? Is it good quality? Do they use color or black and white? Picture quality, we look at the organization and legibility of your catalog, and then also just the information presented. Because as we all know, a lot of sales, they put in different information that fits their operation the best. And so it's just kind of nice to see, you know, what fits the best scenario and which ones bring the most money. So if you go to the next slide, it kind of lays out the averages. So obviously the ones that did all 5 of those that we marked, so they were in color, their binding was good, so forth, they obviously were the higher percentage and obviously brought more money when it came to their average. And then it just probably some of the ones starting out, they had a little bit lower averages, but that's just kind of a quick little tidbit to look at that one. The next slide is the number of years having a sale. I think most of us could kind of figure that this is how it would turn out. Obviously, the ones who have been around have, built that reputation, have built those connections with those customers year in and year out. When they've been around for more than 30 years, there's a big benefit. But I thought it was really encouraging to see that there really wasn't a huge gap with the people that had less than 10 years of doing a sale. So there's a lot of promise and a lot of work that's built up with that. Now I'll let Harold take over because I think he's on his slides now.
You bet. Well, thanks, Rachel. And kind of just to build on what we have been talking about there, I'm going to talk a little bit about the sales setting. And the first thing we looked at in terms of sales setting was the weather. And this one kind of threw us for a little bit of a curveball this year. It appears that if the weather's bad, you're going to have a better sale. And this is the first year we've ever seen that. We did have a really good travel year. We didn't have a lot of bad weather. We had a couple of storms. I think maybe what we were calling bad weather may have been extreme cold. And a lot of times, and then I also think that folks weren't able to attend sales last year because of COVID, and they came out in force this year. I guess the sales I was at, I certainly saw bigger crowds than I remembered seeing in the past. But as you can see, the bad weather certainly had a huge advantage this year, but that's probably not a consistent one, but definitely a fun slide for us to look at. The next one we look at does make a big difference, and that's where you have your sale. And we look at it whether you have it on your ranch, whether you have it at a sale barn, or whether you have it in another kind of facility like a feedlot or a fairgrounds, a bull development center, something like that. The sale barn and the other, there's really no difference in the price, but there's a big price advantage to the tune of about $720 a bull if you have it on your ranch. And that's a large commitment, but we really, and just visiting with bull customers, they like getting boots on the ground on your place, seeing how your operation is ran, and just getting to know you better. Again, kind of connecting that personal piece, and are willing to pay for it as evidence there. The next one we looked at was whether you ran your bulls through the ring or sold them on a video. Again, we saw that most of our producers are putting them on video now, and I think as more and more, and we're seeing that number of sales on individuals' ranches increase each year. I think that the video piece of that continues to increase because of that. Just due to labor and equipment to get bulls run through a ring is pretty extensive, whereas you set up some TVs and you've already done your video work, and the videos, we didn't really put that, but they're pretty much mandatory now to have videos out ahead of the sale. But we saw a $400 and almost $500 advantage by putting those bulls on the video versus actually running them through the ring. And I think some of that has to do with tempo and rhythm that your auction staff can get established, and maybe move your sale up a little bit just because of that. The next one is whether online bidding was available. And after COVID last year, as you can see, there's not hardly any sales that don't have online bidding available. Last year, there was still a decent number of sales that didn't have that available, but again, after COVID, that pretty much changed that. But no surprise that there's a huge price difference to the tune of about $1,100 if you have that available versus if you don't. Next, we'll go into some supplemental data that you might provide to your customers, and we were just kind of curious if this mattered. And one of them was ultrasound data, and it does matter. And as you can see, the majority of sales we went to did provide it, but good thing they did, because ultrasound data was about $725 a bull by providing that. And it's presented a lot of different ways. Most sales we go to present it as a ratio. and producers really like to see whether they're bull ratioed above average for ribeye and marbling. And to them, I think sometimes that might be easier than looking at the EPD, or they may not understand the EPD numbers, but they understand that if they ratioed high, they're better than average, and that's what they looked at there. Another one we looked at was feed intake data. And that feed intake data, though it's a small group of folks that have the ability to test that, only 14%, it too has a $700 price advantage for those producers that can. Again, producers like to see that feed intake data. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Barrett. Barrett's going to talk a little bit about customer service.
Yeah, thanks, Harold. And I guess I'll kind of represent the last part of this slide deck here, and my entire portion will be revolving around the customer service score. We've been recording most of these actually longer than 2 years, but we kind of put it in a specific 1 to 10 score here just a couple of years ago. And so the thing I think is interesting about these is, while we may not be able to play a factor in what kind of weather is going to come, or we can try as hard as we can to have as many AI pregnancies as we can versus natural service type pregnancies, that's still a little bit out of our control. The items on this list are 100% within our control as the seed stock supplier. And so I think it poses an interesting question over how far are we going to go, and to what degree do we want to provide this customer service. And you can see all those items. These are the 10 notches in the belt, if you will, that we take down and determine a customer service score. And like I say, that number is just a 1 to 10 score. And on the next slide, you can actually see there, as we would expect, the higher your score, the higher your sale average. The thing I think is interesting is, just like all of your customers do, just like many of you do on a daily basis, just because the sale average is higher doesn't mean that it's necessarily the greatest decision. It doesn't mean that you have to have 8 to 10 for your customer service score to have a very successful and, more importantly, a profitable bull sale venture. And so lots of these things, again, as it boils down to, oftentimes in production agriculture, really come down to, okay, this is what I'm going to make, or this is what's my return on investment going to be. And so keep in mind as you go through these, some of these work better for certain programs and not all of them may work for yours. But I would encourage you to kind of sift through and see which ones are maybe not only the most valuable, but also the most financially sensible. And so we'll go through a handful of them here. And the first is hospitality. You can see just nearly a $700 advantage for those sales that have an event tied to their sale. Most commonly, I think our team sees that as an evening before or a pre-sale event, whether it be a dinner. Some sales choose to have music, some sort of gathering. And I think that, again, that's really to be expected, that those sales kind of provide some extra fellowship. It allows customers that may be coming from further away to have a reason to come to the ranch or whatever location you're at, not only to look at bulls, but to enjoy their time with your family and with your operation and going through the cattle as well. Insurance offered was another one that we take into consideration. I think this is interesting, just over $600 advantage for those sales that do have an insurance rep of some sort available on sale day. I don't know personally that having the insurance available at your sale means that it's going to be $600+ better. I almost tend to look at this as kind of a byproduct of those successful sales that are selling bulls more frequently for higher dollars or higher dollar figures, as Katie pointed out earlier, to say, you know what, we're going to not only provide this or have somebody on site, but we're going to encourage our customer base to take advantage of this. We do see in some instances seed stock suppliers that are actually willing to share part of the premium with bull buyers that elect to buy that insurance. And so there's a little bit of a secondary layer in there in terms of customer service, but an interesting slide with a very legitimate premium nonetheless. Top dollar Angus would be kind of the next thing that we take into consideration there. You can see just $300 give or take. We do have At 30% of the sales, or almost a third of the sales in the Red Angus breed that our team attended, were top dollar Angus seed stock partners. Those sales enjoyed a $300 premium on this given year compared to those that were not top dollar partners. Your day of pickup discount, again, there's just what would it be, $300 or $350 there. That's split half and half. Again, I think this is kind of one, we're getting into a series of those slides that, as I mentioned, from a customer service score may help your sale average go up. What does it cost you? Is it worth it to go ahead and offer that? And again, I think this is one that many seed stocks producers should look at. I think, again, for $350 on top of your sale average, depending on how many bulls are loaded out, at least in the sales I went to, there seemed to be a lesser instance of trailers on site. And we'll talk about delivery here in a second, but to go ahead and provide incentive, get those bulls off your feed bill and increase your sale average to a pretty good tune, I think is one, the day of pickup discount that certainly deserves consideration. The volume discount, for me, this is the big one. And we can talk about, reported sale averages, sale average that the commercial marketing team members get and are going to go ahead and submit, and the things that we're going to use in our document as we provide this data to be crunched and all of these slides to be put together. Obviously, a huge advantage here for those sales that offer a volume discount. And for those of you that have a sale, it's no secret that a producer, or even better, multiple producers show up and need 8, 10, 12 bulls. They're not just buying those 8 or 10 bulls, they're also bidding and pushing several others along the way. And so I think a very legitimate option here, if you can justify it, to go ahead and pursue or offer a volume discount. But on the flip side, I think it depends a little bit on, okay, if we're going to offer a volume discount, and just for easy math, some catalogs may advertise 10 bulls is a 10% discount. Well, if there's a producer that's bought 9 bulls at $5,000 and they go ahead and buy that 10th bull to get that discount, at that point in time, you're essentially giving them that 10th bull once their discount's applied. And so it depends a little bit on what you can justify, how many of those volume buyers are there, if they're able to get their 10 bulls or 6 bulls or wherever your discount would come into play early in the sale, and they can be done and they don't have to push some cattle later in the sale, then it may not be financially sensible for you to offer that. But if you have multiple producers that you think you can draw into your sale, or you think you can win over to buy that 6th, 7th, and 8th bull at your sale instead of somewhere else, I think it becomes very, very, very valuable. But again, to me, this is the big one that I think as a seed stock producer, we should look at very closely before we decide to offer that, because while it may boost your sale average, we want it to be more profitable in the long run and offer you the greatest return on investment. But nonetheless, from a sale average perspective, you're looking at $800 or $900 for those sales that do have the availability to offer that volume discount. A little bit of the same token there on free delivery, and we just record if there's an instance of free delivery made clear in the catalog. Some sales will say free delivery within a certain state or surrounding states or a certain radius. Some sales will go all over the continental United States for free delivery. And so there's a little bit of variance in that regard. It does pay there with a little bit over $400 premium per head. However, again, if you're selling a high number of bulls, this can become an expensive venture as well. And so here's one that as a bull buyer, I personally enjoy the fact that my seed stock producer takes the time and the effort to come to my place. And at that time, if it's a spring sale that we bought bulls out of, maybe they're willing or have allotted some time to go through some yearling heifers, or maybe they'll go ahead and look at the rest of your bull battery bulls that you had bought from them in years prior and see how they're holding up and how they're maturing. And I will say, from a buyer's perspective, that does matter. And so I would not overlook that. But again, just from a dollars and cents standpoint, I would certainly find out something that works for your specific organization and how you guys can best service your customers while not necessarily driving yourself out of a profitable bull sale, if you will. And the last one I'll discuss is our bag per bull or bag of bull offer. And again, this is producers who have said, you know what, we're going to buy a bag of FCCP or allied access tags for every bull that you buy. And so essentially every bull that a customer buys, that calf crop or the cows that they would be able to cover will be tagged or could be tagged at no charge to the commercial producer. I think this is very valuable. And from a business standpoint, while this one actually shows a little bit of a waning premium, if you will, at $63 per head, we can compare that to that $25 per bag tag cost. And I still, I guess, would look at that as a very smart business decision to go ahead and offer the bag per bull through my entire sale, whether I was selling 60 bulls or 160 bulls, again, to make $35 or $38 per bull based on this information, I think is a very sound business decision. And of course, from a commercial marketing standpoint, we would encourage all members to at least give this idea some thought in regards to your customer service score as Red Angus continues to pound pavement and work in negotiations with the feeder and packer sectors of our industry. Critical mass and sheer volume of these enrolled cattle are going to be crucial moving forward. And so again, this is something as a seed stock producer, as an association member, that you can do to not only help the association and the breed in our fight to create better market access for Red Angus calves, but it can also pay you when it comes to your bull sale and when it comes to customer service. And so at this time, I think I'd go ahead and open it up to questions, not just for me, but for the rest of our team regarding any of the slides that you saw today. And we sure appreciate you getting on and taking a look here at the information that our team collected over the last fiscal year, and hope that you found it valuable. But at this time, again, we'd sure open it up for questions.